Hey, everybody out there. Not sure how many viewers we've got yet, but I'm here with some of my good friends, and we're going to take a look at some of the ways that we can use Google Apps for education to really improve the kinds of feedback that we give to our students. So I'm going to jump right in and tell you a little bit about my experience with Google and why I started down that road several years ago. So about 6 years ago, I was a special education resource teacher, and I worked in the small town of Schaumburg, Ontario. And one of the things that I found was my students didn't always give me the best engagement when I was giving them feedback. So I think part of that was because as I was working with them and we'd sit and we'd conference, they wouldn't have the chance on the spot to change their writing quite as much as they would like or as I would like. They would move on to another student. And then other times when I gave feedback, you know, I would take their work home for the weekend and they would you know, sit there without their work for a couple of days, and then they come back and they really just didn't care anymore. And I don't know about you, but that's also been my experience. When I take a course and, you know, I hand something into the prof and, you know, 2 weeks later I get it back, I'm really not interested in that feedback. So what I found was when I saw Google Apps, I thought, you know what, I've got students, we've got some extra computers in the classroom, we can go ahead and use these. So we signed up for Google Apps and started, you know, doing all of our written work there. And what I found was they were a lot more engaged in the work. And part of it, yes, was computers. But part of it was that I could front load the feedback. And so what you see here is a pretty old school version of Google Apps for Education, where this was even before the comment feature. And I would jump into their document and I'd start giving them feedback. And I would have to go and change the color of my text each time, or send them revisions that way. And we bounce back and forth with ideas like that. And what I found right off the bat was my students were writing 2 and 3 times as much, and that they were waiting for me to jump into the document. They were looking for that feedback, and then they go back and change things. So it totally changed the workflow in my classroom. And that sold me on it, because that was a group of boys who were really resistant writers, and it kind of led me to advocate for the kinds of things that I do now. So I'm going to turn this over to Kim for a little bit.
Hi.
Hey, Kim.
Hi, I'm Kim Polish. Okay, thanks, Scott. I'm just going to share my screen. Tell me if you can see this in a second. And can you guys see this, the slideshow?
I see it as you. You might have to say broadcast to everyone, share to everyone.
Oh, okay. Different. Okay, maybe does someone else want to share it, because it's not...
I see it just fine.
Yeah?
Yep, carry on.
Oh, okay, great. So about a year and a half ago, Scott actually introduced me to Google Apps for Education, and it really changed everything for the way that I run my classroom. And really the thing that got me immediately was the ability to give my students feedback in a timely manner so that it's more relevant to their work. So before I was working with Google Apps, typically what would happen is I would give my students an assignment, they would do the work. If I could, I would conference with them, maybe do a guided group. But for the most part, they would be getting their feedback from me at the end, when the work was done, after it was already graded. And with the introduction of Google Apps, all of a sudden I would give them an assignment, and because we were shared in that doc together, I could provide them with feedback while they were working, and they could use that feedback immediately and apply it before the work was graded, And all of a sudden my feedback became so much more relevant, and I found that they were much more willing to read the feedback, process the feedback, reflect on it, and actually improve their work. Alice Keeler in the US, she's doing her PhD on this right now, actually, and she's called it turn the assignment in and then do the assignment. And this is how I first started with my journey into Google Apps for Education. And for a beginner, the very basics of how you could do this is create a Google Doc or a drawing or a spreadsheet, whatever app you're interested in using with your students. But for the most part, if you're looking at a literacy program, it's going to be a Google Doc. Share it with your students as a view-only file. The students would make a copy of that file and then share it back with the teacher. They could take the next step and actually make the teacher the owner of that doc, which I prefer to be the owner of the doc. And then the teacher would take all of those newly shared with them files, and they'd find them in their incoming, organize it into a folder. And what happens is, right away, the teacher has ready access to the student's doc, and they can provide feedback to them as they're working. If they see, they can jump into any of their students' docs. If they see, oh, you forgot a citation, they could make a quick comment. Remember to put a citation after a text reference. Or, I'm not really understanding this sentence. Can you please clarify? Or something simple like, don't forget your capitals, or whatever that feedback is. And then that student has the opportunity to improve their work before submitting it. And they'll see themselves progress just like the teacher will. And then once you get more comfortable with Google Docs and Google Drive, really, there's really efficient ways to do this in terms of workflow. My preference is to use, it's an add-on by Andrew Stillman, the New Visions for Public Schools. It's called Doctopus. It's the workflow that I choose to use, which basically means I will create docs and push individual versions of that doc to my students, or differentiated copies of that doc to different students depending on their reading level. And because I own the doc, I can control when they receive it, and I'm able to jump into all of their work and give them feedback whenever I want. Now, I'm hoping someone else can jump in here and let me know. In classroom, from what I remember, it was only once the student turned the assignment into the teacher that this teacher was able to offer that feedback. Has that changed? Does anybody know?
Yeah, that's changed now, so that as soon as the student clicks on an assignment, a document is created. The student is still the owner, but right away you become a commenter on the document. So you've got access to that document right away.
Okay, so then both of those would be great methods for the teacher to provide the student with descriptive feedback that's relevant immediately. If you get past that point of sharing a view-only doc, I found it to be transformative, really, in terms of having my students want the feedback, that desire to get the feedback and then apply the lessons from it. It's something I never experienced before. It was always, here's your feedback, and maybe they read it, maybe. But now they're actually even replying to my feedback.
I think that's one of the great things, is that you can, or they can ask you questions and get clarification from you. So it really does become a conversation about their work.
And how often before, when you give a student descriptive feedback, any kind of feedback, do you know if they've read it?
Right.
You really don't know, but with a simple thanks or okay, I got it in a reply, all of a sudden it was shocking to me. Oh my God, they're reading, they're processing what I'm telling them. It was transformative.
It's just fantastic that they can also have access to that before they turn in the work, so they can benefit from that before their final grade comes out.
Absolutely.
All of a sudden the students start to realize, what's the point of this feedback? Oh, it's to help me improve.
Exactly.
And it becomes worthwhile to them.
I appreciate the fact that the teachers are using the comment feature. I think that Scott's going to touch on that a little bit later, but I think that that's one of the strengths, is to use the comments as opposed to actually edit the student's work, because then the student still owns their own work.
Absolutely.
I'm not sharing my screen anymore, right?
No.
Okay. So I just want to pass this over to Jim.
I think it's coming to me, Kim.
Yep.
Thanks. Actually, I'm going to dovetail beautifully onto what you said. Sort of that transformative piece is huge. That's really what it started to do. Is that now everything that I do in my classroom, it's really changing, kind of reminding me that learning is a very social process, and at some point we forget about that, and we forget about the process piece as well. So I'm going to actually kind of take it one step further and jump back into assessment even as well, because that's what we're doing when we're providing the feedback. And just do kind of a quick comparison. We all know about our conversation observations and products, and what I've started doing now is I've Google-fied them, sort of thing, and now that triangulation of data is happening in different ways, and Google's allowing our students and as teachers for us to do so much more. So just to walk you through kind of some of my quick ideas, what's really changing with assessment and feedback, I think, with Google now is that it changes who's doing the assessing, what's being assessed, where, when, how. It's changing everything about the process, and it's allowed me to go back to revisiting that fact that, yeah, learning is social, and it's a process that we're going through. In my traditional classroom, and this used to be my classroom, we had our conversations. They were one-on-one. They were done in class. They were time-consuming, and the learning only ever happened inside the classroom. So often each student never got an opportunity to see you each day and things like that. Some of the conversations were, Kim, you're misbehaving. Scott, stop doing that, and things like that. Or everything else was if something was written down. The observations as well, we were limited to doing stuff in class. I could see them doing group work in class on a particular project, but didn't get a chance to see them interacting when they were doing most of their work, which was probably outside of the class, if they happened to videotape something. But all my observations were really limited to in class, and I couldn't extend things. The products, most of the products that I used to ask for were very, very static. They were papers, do the work, hand it in, then once you hand it in, I'll give you the feedback along the way. Hopefully, I'd always try to have at least one check-in along the way, but in the more traditional model, that was, again, the time-consuming piece. So a lot in the traditional collection of conversation observations and products for me was I in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing? Did I happen to overhear the right conversation? When it comes to Google switching sort of the paradigm, Google's changed how I do it now. So now the conversations and the observations are happening all the time. They're happening in the students' work. I'm seeing their process as the work develops by using things like the revision history. The comments and conversations, some of the richest conversations aren't even between me and my student, they're between students when they're collaborating and working together. The ability to, and as you mentioned, to do to view the work to see what's going on, but to do the commenting, the peer editing, the suggested editing that we're talking about, it's happening all the time. As a high school bio teacher, it always amazed me that I'd be up late working, and one of the students would jump on with me at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we'd start to have a conversation about their work, and then they would brag about it the next day. Not often did I ever hear students talking about or bragging about, hey, I was getting feedback, it was fantastic. So got to monitor the process that was going on. It used to be I would ask students to do that rough copy, and I'd take 60 rough copies home on the weekend, and 40 of them were awful. But now the process of feedback begins as soon as they get that first paragraph down, that I'm able to give them that feedback to say, hey, you're on the right track, I really like this idea, or don't forget to develop these particular ideas. The product piece is where I really, I think, grew as an educator and as a person as well. When I finally said to my students, I said, okay, I need you to demonstrate that you get this in a way that suits you. So all of a sudden they started doing anything from sites to blogs to videos. It was huge. The authentic audience piece for me was a game changer as well. No longer were they just creating sort of for me, but now they were actually creating for potentially the entire world. It was amazing the pride they sort of to take in their work as they were doing it, and they really got to vary what it was they were doing. Like I said, when we look at, I found this word cloud here. It really reminded me that, again, we can't forget that learning is social, and who we learn from and where we learn has completely changed. The feedback we're getting now shouldn't just be from the teacher. It should be from the students from our class. It should be from people all around the world, sort of thing. So I think that was probably the biggest game changer for me in realizing that we can do things a lot differently now. And I'm just going to try and come back to you here. Sorry, I just lost the screen here. Where am I? There we go. I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to, where am I going?
Over to me.
Going to Scott. So Scott, all yours.
There's some great connections there with, more of the stuff that Kim is going to share later for making thinking visible. That's what I connected with in what you were talking about. I'm just going to get into some nuts and bolts strategies for teachers who might be new to using Google Apps for Education, and kind of take you through a couple of things that you can do. So I'm going to start sharing my screen again, and I want to make sure I've got the right screen up. And there we go. You've got my screen here with our presentation?
Yeah.
Yep, okay. So I realized that, when I did the intro, I didn't say hi myself, but I'm Scott Monahan. If you are looking at these documents, at these resources, this link in here is going to take you to a copy of a document that I use in some of my workshops, just to allow teachers to practice working with Google Docs, and how they can use some of the effective feedback features. So I'll take you through a few things that I do now. So number one, up here on the toolbar is your comment button. So if I look at this particular student response, I might suggest that he or she needs a better introduction. So one time I remember it just doesn't sound smooth. I'm going to highlight that text. I'm going to click on the comment button, and I'll say, can you think of another way to begin this paragraph? And I just type it out on the side and leave that comment. So for the student, if they want to know what this comment box is connected to, you'll notice that when you click on it, it gets indented, it gets pulled into the paper, and the color changes on the area that the comment belongs to. So same thing from inside the document. If I click on one time I remember, it does pull in the comment here. So as Kim was talking about, a student might see that comment from a teacher and go, I need some help to come up with some new ideas. I'm not going to worry about my spelling here. And they can reply back to the teacher. And as a teacher, you do get a notification for that, and that will show up in your Google Mail account. So that's fine. The student can go make the changes, etc. Once they've finished making their changes, they can go ahead and resolve that. And it looks like that makes the comment disappear. In truth, if you click on the comments button up in the top right of your document, you can bring that back and see the comment history, trace that path of the conversation that happened between you and the student. You can even reopen it and pull it back into the document. So those are the comments. Now, the problems with those that I've found over the years are in primary classes, students can't necessarily make the connection between the comment over here on the right side of the document and the text that's highlighted within the document. So I found that problematic. Students with learning disabilities sometimes have similar issues. So in the past, one way I used to deal with that is I would put my comments right in the document. So I think you need to find a better opening sentence. And then I would go back and highlight that text and change the color. And what I like about that is it's directly in line so that the student knows where that teacher comment is, that's where they have to make the changes. The problem with that is then the student has to go ahead and delete that to resolve it and clean it up. So this past summer, I was really happy to see Google bring in suggested edits. and it's a lot like the revision tracking in Microsoft Word. So if you look again up in the top right, the default behavior when you own a document is that you're editing the document. You can click on that and turn it into suggesting mode. Now when you're in suggesting mode, what happens is you can jump right into the document, check your spelling, and your text comes in and it appears in a different color. I should check my spelling. Check your spelling. So the student sees that. What I also like is that it does appear as a comment box on the right side of the document. So the student has a couple of options. They can find it here. They can notice it on the side. They can go, oh, I'm going to fix that. And the nice thing is, once they've made that change, they can take that suggested feedback, and if they click on the X, it rejects the change, and their change stays in the document. So they just use it themselves, and I should be making these student changes as an editor. And so that will allow them to kind of quickly see where the changes belong and what you can do. Now, another little trick I learned over the summer is that you can actually use autocorrect features within Google Docs to complete bits of feedback that you find yourself giving on a regular basis. So things like check your spelling, cite your sources. Those are some of the kinds of feedback that you might be giving regularly. As well, you know, as you work through 5, 10 papers, you see, oh, I keep saying the same thing. And so what you can do is under the Tools menu, you've got Preferences here. And so this becomes your autocorrect, just like in Siri, except you can control it. So I can put in a comment here, and I'm going to use SP exclamation point, exclamation point. The reason I use SP exclamation point is because I'm not likely to type that particular key combination unintentionally. So I'm going to say let's replace that with please check your spelling. And I'll close that. I click OK. And now if I come back into my document and I use that code SP exclamation point, it's going to autocorrect. Now I should have done that in editing mode because that gets more, or in suggesting mode because that gets more interesting. So SP exclamation point, and that check your spelling please jumps right into the document. It's green, so the student's attention is drawn to exactly where it is. They can go ahead and make the change, and then they can reject my advice to clean their document up again. The nice thing about using suggested edits is that along with suggested edits over the summer, Google added the ability to delete comments, and a lot of teachers were uncomfortable for this in terms of accountability. You want to be able to see and have parents and students see that history of comments and feedback that you've given the student. So once those are gone, to the best of my knowledge, there's no way to get them back. But if you've made your suggestions and given your feedback as suggested edits, it will show up in your revision history. So within the revision history, I can actually see the feedback that I've given and where it was. So I'll just, and you can see that feedback existing in my document there. So that's been a really positive change, and I would definitely recommend the suggested mode when you're giving feedback to students and when they're working with each other. That's actually the default behavior now for commenters shared on a document. As well, when you share a document through Google Classroom, as a teacher, you're in there as a commenter and you'll be able to use suggested edits right off the bat. So big changes for me, really happy about those. And I'm not even sure who I'm turning this over to next, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Stop. And who am I going to next?
I'm pretty sure it's me.
I think you're right, Lise.
All right.
I'm sliding down here now.
So I'm going to get started. My idea with feedback tonight was really to share with you a way that I've been able to transform a classroom by using feedback for the student, but also sharing that feedback with the teachers and with the other teachers in the school, but also with their parents. So what I'm using is a combination. I'm going to try to share my screen here, so give me just 1 second. Oops. Which one do I want to share with you? Let me try this. All right, how are we doing on that? Is that the right one?
I just see a black screen, Lise.
You see a black screen. Still?
Yeah.
All right, well that didn't work out so well. Let me try another way. I'm going to share my whole screen and make that a lot easier. Did that work out any better? Can somebody tell me if they see my screen?
Nothing yet.
Really?
You want one of us to share the slideshow?
Maybe. That'd be great.
Okay, I'll share it. Hold on.
I've been having computer issues. I actually had to have my entire Mac rebuilt the other day, so it could be why. I should be on my Chromebook. It would make things so much easier.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
I see your screen. So if you wanted to jump down to slide 23 for me, that'd be so helpful. Thanks.
There you are.
Thank you. So next slide would be good. So really the whole way of thinking behind this is I've used a few forms and a few scripts or a few add-ons, actually is what we're calling them now, in order to allow a teacher to very quickly and very easily send feedback home. So if you wanted to jump forward to the next screen, the first step in this positive feedback loop is to collect student emails and then parent emails. And I just do that through a simple Google form I send home, and I get them to fill that out. A couple little hot tips on that is just to make sure that when you do send that home, you can have the student email as a required field. You can also have parent 1 email as a required field, but I try to leave parent 2 as not a required field, so that a student who is only living with one parent doesn't feel the requirement to try to find an extra email just to throw in there. I also like to name them parent 1 and parent 2, or some other ways of doing it, just so that there is no targeted to mom and dad emails, just for those sensitive situations where students have different realities. So that's sort of just the first email that goes out. I collect all that data in a form, and then step 2, thank you, and then I need to create a sample email of what I want to be able to send home with feedback. And what we targeted is, instead of creating a sample email based on your student or your child didn't submit work, or your child didn't show up to school with their gym equipment today, we decided to go with a positive route instead of the negative route. So we've created sample emails that were based on their learning skills and their work habits that we have to evaluate anyways for the Ontario report cards. So if you take a look at the next slide, this would be a sample email, and anything that is colored in this sample email is a variable. So I've created a personalized email that I can tweak depending on what I've observed in my classroom. So this is sort of the idea. If you go to the next slide, you'll get an idea of what I'm using for those variables. So I've got a variable for the location where that happened. Was it in science class? Was it in math class? And then I've got another variable in there that allows me to see. I'm just going to skip through so I know what I'm doing too. That allows me to know when that happened, and that information is actually quite valuable to the parent to know when the student is, when their behavior is still good and when their behavior is less good, just so that they can use that information. I've created some sort of different praise that I can send the student here, and I've basically just mapped out how I wanted that email to look. So the next step is to build the form that I'm going to use myself. So this is not a form that I'm sending out to anybody. The only user of this form is the teacher themselves. I have also shared it with some of the other staff that interact with my same group. So if I have a teacher that comes in to do science with the students, I've shared the form with them so that they can continue the same positive feedback loop. So I'm going to use the Form Ranger add-on, and that's just so that I can fill my multiple choice options really nicely and easily. So if you can forward through, please, Kim. Perfect. So here you see that I'm just using Form Ranger to be able to fill in all those forms. So if we carry forward, so you can see that I'm just populating my form. And on the next one, you have an idea of what my form looks like. I've actually placed this form as a shortcut on my phone, and as I'm walking around the classroom, in 8 short little clicks, an email gets sent home. So it's kind of neat. So this is how I make that back end of it happen. So if we carry forward, the next step is to go into the Google Sheet that's associated with your Google form. And then once you're in there, I just use an import range to go and get that student email and parent email information. And I just, yeah, go ahead. And I just tag that in, if you go one more, just into a new sheet. So you can see, whoops, back up just one. You can see that I've got a student roster sheet in there that I'm just using an import range formula to bring in all that information from another sheet. So you can go forward. This is what the import range formula looks like. That crazy little string of numbers is just basically Google's name for the sheet that had my parent emails and my student emails. So I'm going to basically look that up every time I submit the form. That just avoids my having to have a question on my form that is, you know, what email address do you want to send the feedback to? This will look that up automatically for me, which is great. And then that way, if a parent emails me to let me know that they've changed their email address, I only have to change it in one spot, which is convenient. So that's what that looks like. So the next step is to have the form read from that student roster and bring in the parent emails for the appropriate student. So here you can see what that sheet looks like. And then if you carry one forward, so this is back onto sheet 1, which are the form responses, and you can tell that where I've got student email and parent email, I'm actually using a VLOOKUP formula. So this is just going to compare the student that I'm asking to send feedback to with my student roster, and it's going to pull forward the student email and then the parent emails if they're there. So if we carry one more step forward, I'm now going to copy down that formula, because otherwise every time I submit the form, that formula disappears. So this is just another quick add-on. If you move forward, so it's just another quick add-on called Copy Down. I just have to choose which ones I'm copying down, and those will get copied down as time goes on, which is great. And then I'm going to use the Form Mule add-on to be able to prepare that email that I'm going to be able to send out to parents. And this is what that looks like. So it's basically just using all my variables in there so that I've got my sentence structure prepared and that I'm able to send that on to the different parents. So where it says to, I'll have the parent email in there. I'll always CC the student. I work with students in grades 7 to 12, so I find that it's appropriate for them to know when I've sent positive feedback home. So if we carry forward just one more, basically then and I've used this all over, not just in my classroom. I once walked by a group of students in the hallway and saw them doing some fantastic things, and I wanted to let their parents know. I'm able to just, click through on my phone, and before I even entered the staff lounge, the email had already been sent home. I can tell you that this kind of approach, and you can carry forward just one more, Kim, has really changed the conversation with the students as well as with the parents. It opens that door for the parent to send something back, to send a question back, or to send another comment back. And parents, especially in high school, are no longer used to getting positive feedback on what their students are doing. Some aren't used to getting any feedback at all. So they really find this to be very sort of enlightening, and it allows them to have a window into what's going on in our classroom. So this can be tweaked if you needed it to, but this is kind of what we've done. It also changed the behavior of the students in the class, because they were now aware that I was looking and seeking out ideas or things that they were doing that I could share positive feedback with their parents, and they knew that I would. So their behavior was just completely transformed because they wanted to behave well so that I could send positive feedback home. So that's sort of my feedback story that I wanted to share with you. So it's sort of 3 scripts all together, actually 4, but it's all good. They're all in there, and the step-by-step is there, and don't hesitate to reach out if you need me to walk you through the steps step by step. So I'm going to turn it over to, I think I'm back to Kim. Is that possible?
I think, yep, you are.
Great.
Yes.
So you're already sharing.
I'm already sharing. I'm ready to go. So I just wanted to jump back and talk about one of our focuses at our school last year. We were really working to help our students make their thinking visible. And jumping back into that comment feature, after realizing all of the benefits of using that comment feature to give my students feedback along the way, it finally occurred to me that why can't my students use the exact same feature to make their own thinking visible? So they're giving themselves targeted descriptive feedback. I modeled it for them once using a Think Aloud, showing them as I'm writing and as I'm rereading and revising, any thought that popped into my head, like, that sentence doesn't sound so great, or that sentence is a little bit awkward. Instead of just thinking it in my mind, I want to make sure that my teacher knows that I'm thinking this. So I highlight the text, make a comment, it's on the side, and now my teacher knows what I'm thinking. All of a sudden I can see their thought process, I can see the little bubbles that are appearing in their head, and now they're on the screen for me to assess later. And they also act as a fantastic reminder for students, because typically if that thought pops into their head, oh, this sentence isn't that great, I'll come back to that after, they're not going to, more often than not. But if they take that moment to write that virtual post-it note to themselves, they will remember. And if they don't, there's a record of it for later, so that I can reply to it and say, so glad you realize the sentence is a little bit awkward. Have you considered what you're going to replace it with, or how you're going to revise it? And once I modeled this to my students, they loved that process. I think they also appreciated the fact that their teacher could now see the thoughts that they were thinking, and it became a really great tool for them to track their own work and to show the teacher what they were thinking. And it was such a simple way as a teacher to be able to see that thought process. They love it. So that was my little tip there for kids and how they can make their thinking visible.
I think that's really powerful, Kim, and you know, both demonstrations that you and Lisa have showed are amazing ways to just reconsider how we might make some of these tools more effective, both for students, but also for teachers. Because you know what, part of what I want to do is, you know, make life better, help my students become more reflective thinkers and learners. But also, I don't want to add extra work for teachers, and you know, by making that thinking visible and sharing that feedback home to parents in ways that, yes, may take a little bit more upfront setup, but the time it will save on the back end is amazing. So thanks for sharing. Sylvia, I think we're over to you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to try and screen share. What an awesome job, everybody. Wow. I teach core French at a school called Crescent School. It's an independent school in Toronto. And I teach little guys, so they're grades 3, 4, and 5. So we don't get a whole lot of written work done. It's a core French class. I only see them 40 minutes a day. But we do a lot of oral stuff. And and I found it transformative this year as well. That's a word that I've heard a lot so far in this Hangout, is by giving automatic feedback with a script called Autocrat, or an add-on called Autocrat. And can you see my screen? Can everyone see my screen? Oh boy.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. All right,
You want to
so
present?
so this is just the slide from the slideshow that I put together, and the number one is the Autocrat, the link to the add-on itself if you need to get it, if you haven't got it yet. Number two, click here to see my form. So this is the type of form that I would create beforehand. And so if you just click on that, I'm going to just open that up. Can you guys see this? Yes? Can you guys? Okay, good. Awesome. Okay, so I created the forms with a drop-down list ahead of time, so it's easier to find the students. I don't have to type out their names. So in French class, I do a program called AIM, and we do a lot of play presentations, and so I like to evaluate them. It used to be done on paper. I'd do everything on paper, then hand it out at the end of class, and often these sheets of paper would get lost. Who knows where they'd end up? I teach boys only, by the way. So then I've got the drop-down list for the students' names. I've got the drop-down list for their email addresses, which are not real, by the way. And then these are the types of things that I would be looking at during the presentation, the play presentation. So I'm sorry it's in French, but basically you've got you know, things that I'm looking at, and the things I'm looking at on the left, across the top, is sort of like a rubric from a 1 to 5 system, and then at the bottom, it's not very objective, but I have to give a mark in my school, so I'm looking at, you know, where most of the points fall, and I would say if I say mark there, there, and so this is all live while they're doing their presentation, right? So then I would say, well, it kind of looks like the middle row will represent a B, and then this would represent an A, the fantastique role column, and the pas du tout at the end would represent, you know, not a very good mark. So if it's kind of scattered all over like that, I might say, well, that looks like about a B plus. Like I said, it's not very mathematical, but you can. It's a lot easier, obviously, if the students, you know, or something like that. But if it's scattered, you have to make a subjective evaluation. I'm going to say that looks like about. Well, that's definitely a B. That's a B all the way across. But if it looked something like this, then I might say, well, that looks like a B plus. Okay, so then I'll click submit, and that would go to a form that I've created. Sorry, it'll go to a Google Doc that I've created, and I'm going back to my Google Doc now here. So the doc template, I have one in English and in French, and we'll just take a look at, I guess we could look at the English one. So in order for Autocrat to work, you have to set up a Google Doc with these merge tags. And now I'm getting some feedback, which is distracting. But I'll just push on. Any tips on getting rid of feedback from the experts?
I just muted Jim, so it might have been from him.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, we're good to go now.
Awesome, thank you. So if you click here for demo, that's number 4 now. If you just want to see, those of you who are new to Autocrat, if you want to see experience the magic of it, you can click on here for a demo and fill out that form. Click on submit. And now, what my idea was also that I could ask the students to give themselves a self-evaluation. And so after they presented the player or presented their oral piece, I think this would be ideal for speeches, if you're doing speeches in class, say. They can give themselves a self-evaluation as well. All right, so, but go ahead and fill that out. Anyone in the audience who wants to see how Autocrat works, it's really quite magical, because once you click submit, within a couple of minutes, you're going to get a document in your email, which will look something like what you see on the screen right here. So go ahead and do that whenever you have some time, not necessarily now, but later. And number 5, oh, I just lost my slide. Here we go. Number five is a full description of exactly how to set this up with Autocrat. And number 6, something else I've been using a lot this year, is another add-on which is called Flubaroo, which has made my life a lot easier in terms of marking things that can be marked easily with multiple choice. So I do things like reading assessments and listening assessments. And that saved just hours and hours of marking on my part. So that's all I have to say. Any questions?
No, I think that's
So
fantastic.
I'm just going to jump in about. Oh, sorry, Scott. I was just going to jump in about Flubaroo there. One of my favorite pieces there is not only is it the self-marking piece, which certainly saves us as teachers a lot of time, but the ability to send the feedback back to the students very, very quickly as well.
Right, yes.
Having the solutions that in our hands is great, but you put that kind of data back in their hands, or even better, put it back in their parents' hands, it becomes even more powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of the feedback pieces using Autocrat and things like that. The other nice thing is if you include that going home as well. It's amazing the partnerships that build with parents as well as we start to do this.
Right, and
and they know what's going on. And with Autocrat, because we can send as PDFs, parents don't even have to have a Google account in order to get it. They just have to have email.
I also love Flubaroo because it'll show the students their marks, but it'll also show them what they if they answer something wrong, it shows them the correct answer. So I think that's pretty cool too.
All right, Sylvia, can you stop sharing your screen there for a moment?
Absolutely.
So that's kind of where we plan on wrapping up tonight, and I really want to decided to, or was able to help share their experiences and the different. Let's make sure I'm on. There we go. Yeah, sharing their expertise and their experience with Google Apps for Education, with feedback, with parents and students. All of these resources, the video will be archived on the GEG Ontario site. Definitely, we're there lots, as well as a lot of other really passionate educators from across Ontario. So if you've got questions, you want some help getting started with anything you've seen here tonight, or you want clarification, please go ahead and reach out, and we'd love to hear some feedback on how this first session went, because it's our first go at it. We hope it's helpful. I know I learned a few things tonight, so thank you to the rest of you for joining us.
Thanks, Scott. This was fun.
Thanks for organizing, Scott.
We need 3 people, guys, to break 700 at GEG Ontario. So if there's 3 people watching, let's get on there and join.
All right. Have a good evening, everybody. Thanks for watching, and feel free to reach out, and any one of us would be happy to walk you through our examples at any time.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.